Hello and welcome to the BullCast podcast. I'm Katie Pickler, and with me is Court Winsett.
Hello, Katie.
And Cameron Spann.
Hello.
And I kind of had like a little Mrs. Doubtfire.
Hello. And welcome to Tulip Time.
Tulip Mania. This is going to be an interesting episode. This is actually when we started the podcast back in, the dawn of time, it feels like. We made a laundry list of topics. And that's, we've admitted to you guys, we had some really beefy topics. We were trying to address everything about a bond in one episode and realized you have to bite size this. You have to break it down. Tulip Mania was something that David always recommended that we do. I think it's always been lingering there of like, what is Tulip Mania? When are we going to do this episode? And we're like, oh, we'll do it another time. We'll do it another time. We'll do it another time. Well, Tulu, here we are.
I am actually really interested to hear what you guys have to say on this.
The wild world of tulips. And that's what I kind of questioned the same thing when David brought it up. He's like, tulips and how it has a lot of economic lessons to learn from what happened. A single flower, just the single flower itself, once cost more than a mansion.
That's just crazy.
I'd say you're crazy.
That's crazy. I'm not buying it.
Tulip Mania was a 17th century financial phenomenon. What is that?
Phenomenon.
Dude. Yep.
Ba-da-ba-da.
So this was back in the 17th century. This was in the Netherlands, which tulips, Netherlands. There's a little history lesson there. Like tulips were not the thing in the Netherlands prior to this. Tulip bulb prices skyrocketed and then suddenly collapsed. We know some things like that have happened. It's often cited as the first recorded speculative bubble, though in real economic impact, it's debated. The story remains a classic example of mass market delusion and irrational investing behavior. I was just talking to the guys before this. This is definitely one of those that this story has been told so many times, written in different, history and different economic classes, things like that. And it's just grown and gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. That legend, those stories, and it's kind of like the blue auk, those like old, like
folklore.
Yeah. And so much of it is what actually happened, what didn't happen. And so we're going to kind of talk about that as well, because with anything, this is back to the 17th century. So it's not like we can call somebody and say what actually happened in that town.
Maybe you can't. I can't.
Okay.
I have a special phone.
But first, we got to, of course, do a list. The most iconic pop culture fads that went poop, pop, popped that little bubble. Do you remember when we were traveling on one of our trips? And I think it was when we were in London. It's like, pop your bubbles, pop your bubbles.
Yep,
As a whole, it seems like Americans specifically, when we're walking somewhere, we kind of space out. We like
our space.
We don't want to be right on top of each other. We may walk side by side. And so he was like, pop your bubbles, get close. Like, we're going, don't be a turd and take up the whole sidewalk. Like, make a line.
We had a very proper tour director from London.
Yes.
Pop your bubbles.
Most iconic pop culture fads that went pop. Beanie Babies. We've talked about that one recently.
Yeah, Stock Market episode 3. We talked about some of these.
Next on the list is Pogs and Slammers.
I didn't remember that's what they were called, but I saw something recently. It was just a little circular cardboard disc.
Yeah, and you collected a tube of them. And there was a game, you'd like throw it and it would pop up a Pog.
Okay. Not familiar.
Silly bands.
Oh, I remember
Remind
those.
me.
It's like the little real thin kind of plastic, almost like jelly type thing.
Yeah.
They'd be different shapes.
Like a star, a star bracelet,
A star, a high heel, a character. And they had them everywhere. Fidget spinners.
I still love, if I see a fidget spinner laying around, I'll pick it up and play with it. I love a fidget spinner.
In like 2016, that was the wholesaler like tchotchke of choice. Yeah.
Tamagotchi.
Those were so cool.
Yep.
I loved it.
You grew a little digital pet.
Yeah, and you carried them around and had to make sure you fed them and all this stuff.
What about Lance Armstrong's Live Strong bracelet?
Absolutely.
Oh, I remember those.
I do remember those.
Ice Bucket Challenge. Does that fall in this category?
No. Well, no, 100% not.
It was a fad fundraiser, but it wasn't like that.
Because the Ice Bucket Challenge and there was also egging.
These last few are more in terms of like pop culture fad and not necessarily something you purchase.
Yeah.
Because Ice Bucket Challenge, and then there's one more on the list. We get to the other one that is a more of a pop culture fad. There is Pet Rock.
And pet rocks were different than Chia Pets.
Yeah.
Were they?
We're on the same page because I was going to say things that weren't mentioned on this list, Chia Pets. And also, I'd say WWJD bracelets. Even
Furbies.
For those, yeah.
Furbies are on this list.
But the official last item on this list, the fad, would be planking. You remember that? You would just lay on your belly as flat as you could on like any surface.
Just randomly playing.
Random.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is pop culture fads that went bust. So this is not necessarily financially bust. Everybody was doing it, and
It was
all
really
of a sudden,
big, and then it just stopped.
everybody just stopped doing
Yeah.
it. You're at the lunch table, and you're like, "Oh, look at my Furby," or "Look at my silly bands," and everyone's like, "They're not cool anymore."
A lot of these fads were driven by middle schoolers, and middle schoolers are a fickle, fickle bunch.
I think that's also like it's cultural and how long it takes. Because I told y'all I watched that Beanie Baby movie, and it really when we're up north, and it took a while to get to the south. Starting these trends, of course, now with Instagram and TikTok, then trends move a lot quicker. Okay, let's talk about the tulips. How a flower took over a nation. Tulips arrived in Europe from the Ottoman Empire in the 1500s and quickly became a status symbol in the Dutch Republic. The wealthy and soon the aspiring middle class demanded rare, colorful varieties to show off their sophistication. Tulips were fragile and required expert cultivation, which fueled a growing horticulture industry in Holland.
Horticulture.
The most prized bulbs were broken tulips, streaked with multiple colors due to a virus. I was fascinated when I read that. The tulips are gorgeous, and that's what you think of when you think of Holland. You think of wooden shoes and tulips and windmills. But the reason why these tulips that were so rare were they had viruses.
That's so cool because I've seen these tulips with the beautiful white streak that goes through the petal. Yeah.
They'd have one that was like white with like a red streak through it, and they'd have different ones in the color. Everyone was fascinated by it, but it was a virus.
I don't think humans have a beautiful virus, do we?
No, probably not. These rare bulbs sparked intense demand and helped drive the tulip market into overdrive.
Overdrive.
So supply and demand, is that kind of what we're getting at? I'm assuming here. I haven't read past where we are in the outline, but this is screaming supply and demand to me.
I mean, definitely let's talk about what we've talked about so far, and then there's a lot that we're going to get into. Status symbol. That is a fad that we didn't talk about on here. Like I know around this area, and I'm sure it was other places like North Face. Having a North Face jacket was a status symbol.
The fuzzy jacket.
Your Wallabies, your Birkenstocks, status symbol. Those were name brand things. So having tulips that were in your yard, in your store, things like that, that was a status symbol for the wealthy. And then for, as they said, the aspiring middle class. And because it was still kind of new, and then all of a sudden it's now, well, I don't have just yellow tulips. I have these gorgeous broken tulips that are even more rare because think about misprints. You can have the Michael Jackson Bad album, but if you have the Michael Jackson Bad album that has a misprint on it, it's worth so much more.
Same with Pokemon cards. Yep.
Yep. With this, it's from flowers to fortune. So we'll kind of get into a little bit more what happened and then really kind of discuss. So tulip prices began to climb steadily around the 1620s. By the 1630s, they were traded like commodities. Everyone's starting to get a buzz about it. What are we doing? Everybody's talking about these tulips. What's going on here? So why are they getting more expensive? Because that happens too. Things that make no sense at all, but all of a sudden because somebody has attached a higher value to it, it's like, well, I got to have that because it's expensive. Makes no sense, but okay.
It's like cavemen trading puka shells and rocks, right?
So a single bulb could be worth as much as 4,000 or even 5,500 florins. The best of tulips cost upwards of 1 million in today's dollars, with many bulbs trading into the 50,000 to 150,000 range. The demand for the tulip trade was so large that by 1636, the regular marts for their sales were established on the stock market or the stock exchange of Amsterdam, in Rotterdam, Haarlem, and other towns. A futures market even emerged. So when I was looking into this, it's crazy. So, okay, people would buy the bulb itself or buy the flower. Obviously, the bulb, it's kind of one of those, you're not exactly sure. Is this a broken tulip? What color is it going to be? Things like that. They realized they're only able to sell during floral season when these flowers are blooming. What about, we're running out of supply now. What are we doing? Let's start writing you a contract that I promise that, you're going to get a tulip when tulip season happens. So you're signing this contract. That started really the futures. You're guaranteed that you're going to be able to purchase this tulip for 1,000 florins. So that started the future. But then what has been out there, and again, this is, there's some speculation on what's actually true and what's your future to Cam. And it's changed all these hands and it's not even there yet. It's you're waiting on what happens. What happens if the whole crop gets burned down? You have no idea.
Yeah, this is interesting. You hear about the term futures in finance, and I don't think we've ever really discussed it until now. So futures, is that kind of based on speculation almost? How would y'all define futures in the finance world?
Okay, so there is a speculative market for futures, and then there is also what I would call a hedging option for futures, where you, like for instance, a farmer might a wheat future because he can get a price now for this wheat crop that he's going to have, and that guarantees him that money for that crop. If he thinks that the price of wheat might drop, then he's protecting against that potential price drop. So it can be something that you do, that you sell to protect yourself. It could be something that you buy if you're afraid that wheat is going to go up and you're a bread maker. So you want to go ahead and lock in a lower price now.
Kind of pre-order.
Before the wheat goes up, then you go ahead and get a wheat future now. And that way, 5 months down the road, you're buying wheat at a price. And if you were right and the wheat market, for whatever reason, skyrocketed, you're getting it at a lower price and you've saved yourself some money. And then you can get your wheat and you can use it to make bread.
That is fascinating.
Yeah. What was happening is prices were really detached from reality because the bulb itself was being sold multiple times, going through multiple hands. This dives into deeper that the bulb was very sturdy, so it was easier to physically pass between multiple hands. Now, the tulip itself, the flower had to be, you couldn't trade as much because it is fragile. And it was literally the one. And if you've ever looked at a tulip bowl, it looks like an onion, which there's a story that goes with this that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. That story's been debunked somewhat, so we'll see. They're being traded several times over, buyers hoping to flip and then make a profit. It seemed at the time when all this was going on that prices would only go up and that this passion for tulips were going to last forever. So that's why I was but it got to the point, like we talked about, where people were paying for those rare, diseased, broken tulips, paying would have been the price of a mansion, taking the money that would have been for their house to then have 5 tulips or 1 tulip. Craziness.
So at some point, somebody said, this is kind of crazy, right?
So the bubble burst at the end of 1637. Buyers announced that they couldn't pay the higher prices. Yeah, somebody was like, this is ridiculous. Like, it's a flower. What are we doing? Stop it. We need to start doing wooden shoes. Like,
Stop it. Stop it.
Buyers, they said, we can't do it anymore. Previously agreed upon for bulbs, and the market fell apart. But it wasn't as a devastating occurrence for the nation's economy as a lot of times it's built up to be. The event destroyed relationships built on trust and people's willingness and ability to pay. Though the broader economy survived, some historians argue that the fallout wasn't as widespread as others portray, but the event left a cultural scar. It became a cautionary tale about unchecked speculation and the fragility of market confidence. It's doom and gloom, and it's like, oh, there was a depression. Even one of these little clips I was watching said, and the canal ran with all the businessmen who committed suicide after the tulips bubble burst because they had lost everything, and the eruption of this whole economy destroyed. It wasn't that severe. It wasn't that dramatic, but it did, as we've said before, the story has built and grown over time. It was a cautionary tale. It did show the first time that how everything snowballed. Everything got so excited. It really got out of hand quickly. Even to the fact, the onion story I was telling y'all, there was supposedly, and this has been told that this hasn't happened, that there was a fisherman that gave another merchant a fish, and that was his payment. And so he was going to eat this lunch, and then this merchant saw what he thought was an onion and stole the onion because he didn't feel like the fish was enough payment, and he put the onion on his sandwich and ate it. Well, it was a bulb, and it was apparently the bulb of one of the broken tulips. And then he was thrown in jail and, committed a felony and like all this drama. That supposedly did not happen, but it was the showing of how this fisherman had this bulb supposedly that he had spent so much money on. And he was really putting all his eggs in one basket, relying on this one bulb to make him a lot of money.
That's not smart.
No. But so since then, a lot of people have said that historians have used this story to really talk about morality and gambling and, really kind of looking at business structures, what they were doing, really even examining the future market, how where has this all been? Where is the track record here? What's happening with this? All this money that's going crazy. And why? Why was it doing that?
Yeah.
Tulip Mania is a model for the general cycle of a financial bubble. Now, the other thing I was reading is that people call this one of the first bubble, but Some of the historians are arguing, was it really a bubble? Because a lot of the other bubbles we compare it to, people were getting greedy. And the reason why it had the bubble is because people would grab stuff to then turn around and sell. And they were creating that. With the tulip market, supposedly the story is everybody really wanted these tulips and they weren't trying to be greedy and, cause this drive and profit.
Well, it starts off as anything does. It starts off, Cameron, when you said, is this a supply and demand thing? If the tulip is something that everybody wants, and especially for a rare one, people are willing to pay more. If your supply is low, then lower, then, people are going to be willing to pay more for whatever is available. But then you get investors and speculators getting involved and trying to turn a buck off of just trading the tulips. That's when you can really see irrational aspect of it take off. This is one of I like this line at the very beginning in terms of history, what the Tulip Mania was a model for the general cycle of a financial bubble. Investors lose track of rational expectations. You start to buy in. It kind of reminded me when you were talking about people basically going crazy. One of my favorite lines from the original Men in Black. Person is smart. People are dumb. Basically, the idea that there's a sort of mass groupthink mentality that kind of takes over.
No, but that happens. The irrational thinking and how we've talked about before, Jingle All the Way, Turbo Man.
Yep.
How it's just, they're all going after this one toy. And there was somebody behind the scenes that it's like, that toy had been out before. And it's now people are able to jack up the prices. You're willing to do crazy things to get across this toy and spend so much money on it.
Yeah. In hindsight, it will always sound ridiculous. But when you are caught in the frenzy, it's hard to step back and, I keep drawing a correlation between the tulips and the Beanie Babies. They have, the same story. It's it's a little stuffed animal worth, 50 cents. If you're selling it on eBay for $50,000,
Can you imagine back then, obviously word of mouth was how things transpired, but it'd be like someone sitting in the local tavern and it's like, oh, well, I paid, 25. Oh, well, I got this rare one. It's like, oh, well, you only have two. I have the rarest of rare ones. Or I've got a future contract. I'm going to end up getting 5 bulbs. And then people want to get a part of it. They want to keep up with the Joneses. That's really what it is.
This is kind of similar, and I don't know if we've talked about this, but do y'all know how the license plate situation in Saudi Arabia is? Have y'all ever seen videos on that?
No.
It's fascinating. Here in America and most other places, you're just assigned a random tag number. There, because everyone is so wealthy, they all drive supercars. They needed something else to make it special. So the lower the car tag number you have, the more prestigious you are.
Wow.
So I've seen a picture of the number 1 tag in Saudi Arabia on the front of their supercar. It's fascinating, and you can actually trade them, and they trade, and you can buy them for millions of dollars, just a license plate. Isn't that crazy?
That is insane.
Wow.
It's awesome. Look it up sometime. Yeah.
It's crazy.
This has been going on for a very long time. And so that's why I think people really reference the Tulip Mania, especially in our industry, and why David told us about how we need to do this on the podcast, because it all goes back to about a flower and how expensive. So Court talked about the rational expectations. There's the psychological biases leading to a mass upswing in the prices of an asset or a sector. Absolutely. We've talked about biases before and really having that understanding with that. A positive feedback cycle continues to inflate prices.
Yeah.
And investors realize that they're holding an irrationally priced asset. Are you going to admit that?
We frequently will advise people to buy something and hold it.
Yep.
Hold it for the long term, wait for it to grow, don't react to market fluctuations. But in a situation like this, when you're dealing with something that is sort of a mass fad, eventually people are going to go I'm holding on to this item that is way, way overpriced for what it is. It's a tulip bulb. And so what are they going to do? They're going to try and cash in on it while the prices are still crazy high. And once you do that, you start having a sell-off and the market's going to collapse.
Yeah, because everybody's doing it. Everyone's trying to do you try and sell it off? Do you hold on to it? And it, going back to the Beanie Babies, then you've got an attic full of Beanie Babies that do not mean anything except for, I guess, the dog has a new toy to play with.
Yes.
Prices. So the prices collapse due to massive sell-offs and an overwhelming majority go bankrupt.
Yeah.
And the timetable of all this happening, we talked about that the bubble burst back in 1637 and that tulip prices started in 1620.
They started going up in 1620s. Yeah.
1620s, 1630s. It had a good run. This ran for a while.
It also goes to show you that it didn't just overnight, the prices didn't skyrocket.
No.
This is something that built on itself. The flowers themselves become popular, and that makes people want them. And then, they're like, okay, well, let's get these bulbs being imported from wherever the Ottoman Empire was importing them. So,
and then, it's not flower season anymore. So let's do the futures. Let's have these contracts. Let's do this. And it is a good lesson on a lot of the different economic things that we deal with today. Because you think about, you've got the NFTs, the non-fungible tokens, you've got Bitcoin. There's so many different things out there, but all of the different patterns of how people spend and save, trade, all of that. It's going back to history and how different things have happened and us learning from history. That's kind of a key, is making sure that we look at this. And so while it's been debated that this wasn't a big depression, this only affected a small group of people, really, when you look at the overall culture for the Dutch, but it still had a lot of lessons that today, economics, we're comparing it to it.
I guess one of the important things to note is we sort of ran over this, but it was something that we mentioned. These things were actually traded on the Dutch market.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people remember episode recently on what is the stock market, but you'll recall that the Dutch market was one of the original stock markets. And so when you have people that are trading something like this on the market, if massive investors are putting a whole lot of their money into something like tulips, the bottom falls out, then they lose a ton of money. But it's not like it just affects those investors. It's gonna have a broader impact on the economy. So
Absolutely.
This may not have caused a massive depression for the entire Dutch nation.
It impacted a lot.
It definitely impacted a lot.
Yeah, because prior to this, it was a lot of spices and things like that they were trading. And then it turned to the flowers because it was something new and exciting. And then obviously with the variation with the virus of some of the tulips, then that caused a big roar. One of the things I was fascinated to look at is the tulip seeds inside the bulbs that, then turn into bulbs can take anywhere from 3 to 10 years to turn into a bulb. So that's, again, probably why this was spread out for so long, is that you're playing the long game with that, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
It's cool. My mom's grandmother had tulips, and because of the way you can split bulbs and they grow like wildfire. My mom got some, and then she's given it to all the children, and I have some in my yard, and they're growing.
Oh,
so
cool.
It's pretty cool how you can pass them along.
Well, now when you look at your tulips, you can then tell your kids
I will
about
never
the Tulip
look at them
Mania.
the same way again.
You're going to think back to somebody at one point paid a mansion worth of dollars for one.
Yep.
Because, now it's, especially like finished Easter, month and a half ago, I guess now.
Yeah.
And that's tulips were really big at that point. And so that's a lot of times when you see them, and you'll see them in mediums driving down the road, and it's like the city's just throwing them out there. And, back in the 1630s, they would have been like picking them up and doing crazy things with it.
Yes.
Before we wrap, can I do one more thing on this crazy card tag situation?
Yeah, absolutely.
I Googled over here. It's just interesting trivia you can tell your friends, and it's all about keeping up with the Joneses. So in Abu Dhabi, the 1 tag in 2008 sold for $14.3 million. The 5 tag sold for $6.8 million. And so there are status categories. The 1 through 9 are worth the most.
Oh, yeah.
10 through 99 are category 2. Category 3 are repeating numbers like tag 11, 22, 33. And then the 4th category is it kind of matches your car, like the Ferrari 599. If you get plate 599, that's like, whoa, that's a cool status thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was very interesting.
Very interesting.
I do have to throw a little pop culture plug in there because we have talked about keeping up with the Joneses a little bit in this episode. John Hamm has a new show,
Amazing.
Your Friends and Neighbors, and he references that it's about keeping up with the Joneses. It doesn't give it away, a spoiler, because the whole premise of the show is that he was a part of this affluent group, lost his job, and now is kind of trying to figure out, well, how is he going to survive, and realizing that all his wealthy friends have all this stuff in their house.
And he goes a-looking.
He goes looking, and yeah. And so it's kind of one of those like, oh, this $150,000 watch, probably not going to realize it's gone.
crazy.
That's
Are
crazy.
you all caught up?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
I have not
Check it out.
watched any
Only,
of that yet.
As of recording this, there's only 2 episodes out, so it's a good time to get in.
Yeah, just dropped, but that really
What streamer?
Apple.
I mean, it really puts in perspective how things like this, people spend a lot of money sometimes to keep up with the Joneses because someone has associated value to it. And again, remember, that's the thing is that different things have value depending on the need. So like COVID times, toilet paper had a much higher value than usual because it was scarce. You had situations like that. And so always going back
Well,
to
it
your...
was scarce because a bunch of people were hoarding
it, yes. Exactly. There was a reason behind that. Everybody freaked out. Winter weather's coming in. You can't find bread or milk for the life. And it's, what are these people doing? Eating milk sandwiches?
I've never understood the bread and milk thing. I would want like cheese, nuts, and beer. Oh, baby, it's gonna snow. Give me some cheese, some nuts, and some beer, please.
Kind of wrapping this up, smell the tulips, but don't bet the farm. You're never going to look at tulips the same way again. Hopefully it helps you remember about the being smart with your investments, thinking rationally, diversification, really understanding what kind of went down back in 1630s that really caused all of this, and understanding that just because something is popular or beautiful doesn't mean it's valuable. Think long-term and avoid investing based solely on the hype. I've told y'all before, like so many times when people are hyped up about a stock or about something like that, it's almost too late at that point. It's gotten too crazy and far gone. And you're like, why is this stock worth this much right now? Why did that happen? Well, everybody decided to do a Reddit article or something like that crazy happened.
Yep.
Hopefully you'll look at tulips a little differently. Bullseye.
No, there's the closing bell. Ladies and gentlemen, you've made it to the end of yet another episode of the BullCast podcast. If you liked what you heard and you'd like to hear more, please feel free to go to your favorite subscription service and sign up to have our podcast delivered directly to your device every single Thursday at noon. If you'd like to find out more about Cortland, Katie, Cameron, or Nicole, please feel free to go to our website. We've got pictures up there. The website is bullcastpodcast.com, by the way. We've got pictures up there. We've got bios. We've got a place where you can drop a comment or suggest a topic you'd like to hear us talk more about. But hey, I mentioned pictures. We do have an Instagram handle. That handle is at BullCast Podcast. We also have an X handle, which is also at BullCast Podcast. And finally, rounding out the social media, ladies and gentlemen, it's our Facebook page, which is BullCast the Podcast. And if we didn't mention it today, we mention it every other time. Ladies and gentlemen, we work at a place called Pickler Wealth Advisors. And if you'd like to find out more about us, find out about what we do, find out about what we could possibly do for you, find out about our amazing team, and find out about our boss, David Pickler, please feel free to go to that website. That website is picklerwealthadvisors.com.
That's advisors with an O.
Not an E.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have given you so much trivia that you can go forth to your next party and use to thrill the listeners. So for now, I'm Court.
I'm Katie.
I'm Cam.
And we're done.